It's a project that's really making use of all the newest possibilities in terms of audio hardware and also concepts and styles kind of combining that only could happen now.
If there is a moment for when this album was first conceived, I guess it would be when I was experimenting with 360 microphones. We'd place it in the centre of spaces and I'd direct the vocalists or instrumentalists recording the same kind of musical idea in various locations around the space. And then we'd edit that material, chopping between the fragments of sound to create kind of musical shapes and structures which had that kind of 3D spatial element to them. The next stage was to start composing the materials for all the instruments, so drums, vocals, brass, piano, structured around these musical shapes to create something that could be performed as a sort of 360 immersive experience for the audience, but also work as a sort of stereo stage show. The album is called Contours. The concept was to use these 360 structures which go through a very simple transition from A to B, or something cyclic which is repeated but altered. For me, conceptually, it's about change. Going through change in your life as a society, a family, as a group of friends. It's the change that we have to go through. What's going on now has kind of solidified all of these concepts and just made it seem right.
Begin to let yourself think.
He'd thought a lot about what he wanted this album to be about, and then I would generate lyrics from that, but also connecting some of my own ideas and experiences. It was quite an organic process, and this was amazing working with a creator that kind of really chips away at things and changes them and transforms them.
I'm working with two incredible vocalists, Rosie Strobel and ZOSIA JAGODZINSKA. They've both got incredible voices, but very different voices. They put so much into ideas and concepts, and so it's a real collaborative process.
The way in which he writes, there's an intellectual aspect to it as well. It's not, does this sound pretty? There's sort of formulas, there's structures that mean that when you're writing words, there's sort of a boundary, there's a framework.
This is the first time I've worked on an EP or an album where I've worked with live drums. Each track is constantly evolving in terms of kind of energy and dynamics. I wanted to work with a jazz drummer, Simon ROTH, that could create beautiful textures but also sustain a beat that changes over time gradually.
It's coming out of a kind of jazz sensibility, and for me the reference points are like Amon Tobin and like Naughty's Ninja Tune, and obviously Dan has a background in drum and bass and some of the kind of breakbeat. Well, it's kind of a mishmash of those things, so I wouldn't say it fitted into any of those styles.
Working so closely with jazz musicians, talented, top of their game jazz brass players, was an incredible experience. I worked closely with RAPHAEL CLARKSON, who is an amazing trombone player and arranger, and we kind of composed and arranged the brass material together. So he took the lead on some tracks, I kind of took the lead on others, but his experience was invaluable.
The aspect of the kind of 360 sound recording and performance concept, you can really experiment with some of the arrangements because you know that things can then be pulled into the shape that's desired in the production process. So it's kind of perhaps more exploratory and experimental way of arranging and writing.
As soon as I heard the record, I definitely got a vibe of James Bond was definitely the first thing that I felt. There was this very grandiose sound and big minor keys, And it was a really interesting collision of like modern production techniques and then traditional jazz. We mixed the album across 3 different studios in different stages. So we initially started building up the main core of the mixes up in Val's studio. On like on a very modernised Pro Tools setup using really sophisticated plugins and stomp boxes, and then we moved it over into my studio, which is much more based upon a kind of like late 90s drum and bass jungle kind of setup, using vintage kind of mixing consoles, hardware samplers, tracking all of those elements.
It gives that character. That's what will impart that sonic character to it, right?
Yeah. And then we bought the final mixes here at the Funk House, which is in Germany, and running everything through this amazing Trident mixing console. So we ran everything through like a multitude of like home and high-end recording studios, basically.
The last few weeks have been really exciting, like finally sort of piecing the album together properly. So much has gone into this collaboratively, but also personally, and it's sounding great, and that's really exciting. The album is going to be on vinyl, it's going to be digital in stereo, we've got a 360 immersive online experience as well, with visuals and 360 sound. And then we'll be performing it, whether that's a 360 sound system with the dub scoops of the Unit 137 in the Albany Theatre, or normal stage shows.
I think it's quite important to sort of be riding at the forefront of that wave of how now we're gonna bring art to people, how we're gonna embrace the challenge, and I think Dan's done that really, really well.
It's one of those amazing mixtures of so many different influences and ways of creating music. It sounds really unique and distinctive.